All right, welcome to our Rovo Readiness workshop. My name is Joshua Demtri. I am a principal solutions architect at Valiantis. I'm here to walk you through Rovo and specifically to do a little bit of live demoing and walking through how we actually build Rovo agents for our customers and what that looks like practically speaking. So if you've attended one of my webinars in the past, some of the content kind of in the early stages of this might be a bit of a repeat, but we're going to kind of do a quick recap over that and then spend the bulk of the time here actually building an agent together. You'll be able to kind of watch what it looks like to from 0 to 1 essentially build an agent that actually works in the environment and see how Rovo could work for you in your environment. So I want to go ahead and start off by introducing a little bit. So I'm from Valiantis, and Glintech is the regional organization from Valiantis in APAC. So you may be familiar with Glintech. Basically, a one-stop shop for everything Atlassian. So we have from training like this webinar all the way through to full implementation and also full stack software development that we can offer as well. So basically anything Atlassian we are able to help you guys with. These are a couple examples of some of the offerings that we have. Rovo implementation being the most kind of related to this content, since that's going to be a little bit of what we're walking through in this workshop. So if you have needs that go beyond what you can discover from Atlassian documentation, or you want to get some more hands-on experience, we can go through that as well. It's also things like cloud review and training and support and all the things that that you can find on our website as well. All right, so I want to jump right into this diagram and talk a little bit about how Rovo fits into the enterprise architecture, or really any architecture of Atlassian cloud products. So if you have been to my other webinars, you've seen this diagram before. I want to just quickly do a bit of an overview of what we have in this diagram to walk through how Rovo fits into it. So on the left side in the blue, you're going to see everything that's Atlassian. So these are all the Atlassian products like Jira Confluence, Jira Align, Atlassian Analytics, Atlassian Intelligence is on there as well. And then we've also got Rovo. Rovo is going to be the main topic here, obviously. And we also have on there Forge. So Forge is one that I won't necessarily spend as much time in. But if you aren't aware of what Forge is the developer platform for Atlassian Cloud. So if you are, looking for a way to kind of extend the products in Atlassian Cloud, you want to build your own plugins, build something for the marketplace. That's what Forge is there for. We're going to talk a little bit about how you could use Forge, but not go super in depth with it. I just wanted to give you a bit of a call out in case you are looking for how to extend the feature set even further. And on the right, we're going to see customer tooling along with external applications. Really, the main thing I want to call out here is that part of what Rovo aims to solve is the fact that the data and the work that we're doing in an enterprise organization, or really an organization of any size, is going to live in more than just one tool or one platform. So while Atlassian might be the source of truth for a lot of the work that we're doing, or a lot of the data that we're storing in our knowledge base, it's not necessarily going to be everything. So we want to be able to also go to our internally built applications, maybe other ticket tracking software, other work management software. Maybe you have service management being done in another tool and you want to bring that data in as well. We want to talk a little bit about how Rovo helps us bring all of that data into the same platform so that we can use AI on top of everything in the entire organization and not just the Atlassian products. So we're going to see some examples of that. You'll see examples here being like integrations with external systems, reporting dashboards. So let's say you have a whole bunch of reporting being done in Tableau or Power BI, and you need to pull in data from your other tools into those reporting dashboards. We can use Rovo and Forge to do that. Now in Rovo, in this section in the middle, this is obviously our focus for our webinar and our workshop today. We have three main categories of Rovo to talk about. So that's going to be search, chat, and agents. I'm going to dig a little bit into each of those three. I'm going to do that in 3 slides that are coming up to kind of walk you through each of the pieces. What I want to point out on this diagram as kind of like a quick overview is that Rovo search is going to be how we find information across the entire organization. Rovo chat is basically how we can talk to the AI to get answers about that information. And then agents are how we build custom tooling or custom flows or kind of more specific tooling around AI for our organization. So I want to jump into each of those a little bit more in depth, and then we're going to jump into the actual workshop and build some of these together. So talking about Rovo search first, like I pointed out, this is going to be where we use Rovo to find the information across the enterprise. So we are not just going to be looking at Atlassian products here, actually. So a big part of Rovo, like I was saying before, is that external data and external applications are going to be a part of our architecture in an organization of any size. So Rovo has a concept of connectors, and connectors are essentially ways for Rovo to talk to external tools, like let's say Microsoft Teams or SharePoint or Google Drive, or any of these other tools that you might have a knowledge base or some sort of data that could be helpful to the insights you're building with AI. Rovo has ways to connect to that data, and as time goes on, gaining more and more tools that it can connect to. And the search that we have in this unified Rovo search area is going to go through all of the Atlassian tools. So, Jira and Confluence, along with all the other tools in Atlassian, but it's also going to search those external tools and use that data to create the insights or to create the search results that it's giving you. So if I go into, Rovo search and ask it for information about a certain project, and that project has data that also lives in Google Drive, where Google Drive is compiling some of the knowledge base for that tooling. Well, I'm actually going to get search results from both Jira from that project and from Google Drive, because Rovo Search has knowledge of the entire organization, not just of the one tool. So this is where we're going to be extending the reach of our search to everything in the organization and going beyond what we can do with just like a standard keyword search. So that's Rovo Search. Rovo Search is a tool that you basically just turn on and it works out of the box. So Rovo Search is one that we're going to spend less time in the workshop, simply because of the fact that it works day one. And as soon as you turn it on in your instance, it's doing the right thing and it's kind of handling that for you. So there's no need to kind of walk you through it, because it's pretty simple to grasp. You just start searching and you get information from all these different sources. Now, Rovo Chat is going to be the next place to go here. So Rovo Chat is going to be, and one more note that I forgot to mention as well. If you have any questions that come up, feel free to use the Q&A button on Zoom and ask your question there. I'll get back to that whenever it kind of makes sense in the flow of the talk. So feel free to use that Q&A button. Apologies for not pointing that out. Before jumping in here, I get a little bit excited about all the AI tooling here. So let's go ahead and talk about Rovo Chat, which is going to be probably the most familiar interface that we have for dealing with AI just in the ecosystem, in the industry in general. Rovo Chat is going to look kind of like ChatGPT, right? You can see the screenshot here on the right, where we've got a chat box that we can ask questions and we get responses from that chat, and we're able to move forward from that and kind of get some information. Well, what it does that goes beyond what like ChatGPT can do is that RoboChat has direct access and knowledge of all of the data in your instance. So beyond what it has for, just the broader context of the world, it specifically knows all of your Jira projects, all of your Confluence pages and spaces, all the data that we have across the board. And you'll be able to see that when you start asking chat questions, you're getting responses that are really contextualized to what your organization's way of working is. So rather than having kind of like a general all-purpose chatbot like ChatGPT, it's going to be specific to your organization without having to do any of the work to implement that. So similar to Rovo Search, Rovo Chat just kind of works out of the box, and it does a lot of really cool things without having to spend a bunch of time configuring it, because it just trains itself on your data. So when you turn on Rovo Chat, it goes through all of the information in your Atlassian instance, along with all the data that exists in those connections. So RoboChat also has access to the external tools that you hook into it. And it's going to learn from that data the answers that make sense for your organization and move from there. So that's RoboChat. And I know I'm going through this a little bit more quickly. That's because we've got a lot of content to get through here. So if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A, and I'll kind of get back to those as we have time at the end. Looking at Rovo Agents, this one I'm going to spend a lot more time on, because this is the bigger one. This is where we go beyond just the out-of-the-box tooling, and we can actually get to some more specific use cases that we're going to have in the organization for our particular needs with AI. So one of the ways to interact with an agent is through chat. So we just saw Rovo Chat. what we can do is create an agent that is a more specific, more custom tailored version of RoboChat, but it is designed to work for a particular use case. So in this example I have on this screenshot, it's actually a legal assistant that was designed for a demo with a legal team that needed help to gain some information about the different cases they were managing in a JSM project. And this agent is specifically tailored to understand the context of that particular project and give answers based on the criteria it was given when we created the agent. So we're actually going to be building an agent similar to this one here in a bit when we get to that workshop portion, which will be the bulk of our time spent building an agent that kind of does something similar to this and showing you the thought process that we go through in order to build one of those agents. Now, chat isn't the only way to handle agents. You can also deal with agents through automation. This is actually my favorite feature of Rovo. In Rovo, you can basically create a regular Jira or Confluence automation. You can go and start doing your normal automation steps, and you can use an action now that exists in the automation called this use Rovo agent that will talk to the agent for you in the context of the automation. So rather than having to manually go open the chat and type in a prompt, we can have this be triggered based off of anything from the automation. And it allows us to kind of create that style of automation and further knowledge and basically be able to have all this tooling from AI automate our processes in these automations, both in Jira and Confluence. And I'm also going to be walking you through creating a automation around the agent that we're going to build, so you can see what the process looks like to implement an agent in automations as well. Now, where it goes a little bit even further beyond the scope of what we're going to be talking about here is that we have some pretty much infinite possibilities with Forge. So with Forge, you can also create Rovo agents. This is where we actually get into the software development. And you can go and create a Rovo agent that is built with the code that you can write in Forge, which allows you to basically do anything that you can write in code triggered by the context of the AI. And like I said, there's not going to be enough time to really get super deep into that. But if you have further questions on that, reach out and we can have more conversation around what we can do with Forge. But we can essentially have the AI do any task that we can write the code for. And that's going to be a really powerful thing as you start to have this kind of AI transformation mindset where you're using AI to enhance and automate every part of the process in your organization. Forge is going to allow you to get even that one step further and basically accomplish a lot of things that would otherwise be impossible. All right, so those are the three areas to talk about. I know that I went through those a little bit quickly, but we're going to show them in action and actually spend some time building them. And I want to get into the kind of meat of the workshop in order to do that. One thing I do want to talk about is security and trust. So one of the things that's really important about Rovo is that it respects the existing user access controls. So this is true for both the Atlassian tools and the Atlassian Cloud Platform, but also for the external connections that you have tied into Rovo. So let's say I have my Atlassian platform and I also brought in Google Drive as a source for Rovo. What it's going to do is that, first of all, if I ask a Rovo agent to give me information about a project that I as a user don't have access to, it just won't give me that information. It won't even know that it exists because I don't have access to it, and it doesn't use it to respond to me as a user. And then if I go ask it a question that's going to reach out to Google Drive as the example and pull back information from Google Drive, it'll also ask me to authenticate with Google Drive and make sure that I don't have that I do have access to the file it's trying to pull from Google Drive before it gives me that as the response that I receive from that chat with the agent. So all of the user permissions that exist out of the box in Jira and in Atlassian Cloud products are always respected. That's one of the things that's really beneficial about Rovo. So rather than having to build up your own, models and mindset of how to build these agents, you can just use what's already there in your instance for Jira and Confluence and the other Atlassian Cloud tools, and it will just use those same user controls for the AI tooling. The other thing to talk about here is that inputs and outputs are not used to train or enhance the models. So that essentially is just calling out the fact that your data isn't being used to train other people's organizational tools, right? So if we look at what Rovo is doing behind the scenes from a technical perspective, it's actually a combination of some internal models that are being used by Atlassian, along with OpenAI models that they have a kind of a contract with OpenAI to use. But those OpenAI models are only receiving kind of some obfuscated versions of the chats you're sending and not the full context. And they're not using it to train anything else. Same is true about the models internal to Atlassian. All the prompts that you're sending and the responses that you're getting, those are all things that are being handled in a way that they are not training any other organization's data. And through that, it's also SOC 2 and ISO 27001 certified. So this is a new thing as of this year. For a while, all of the tooling behind the AI features in Atlassian Cloud have been kind of the different pieces of it have been compliant. But as of this year, it's actually fully certified for these standards. So that's a great thing to see as we have the future kind of pushing forward into AI. Right now, what we're still looking at for the biggest gap in security and trust, if it is a requirement for you, is data residency. We expect that to be supported in the future, and we hope that that's coming soon. But currently, data residency is not supported as part of Rovo. So just keep that in mind. It shouldn't be a blocker to start working with Rovo and start building value, and we can help you walk through that process. But it is something that we would like to see from Atlassian in the future and expect that to come in the coming months or however long that takes them to develop. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about some strategies for Rovo agents. So I want to start here because we're going to be using everything I talk about in this slide in particular, and also the next one, to understand how we're going to go about the workshop section of this presentation. So looking at this Rovo agent implementation slide, I have 3 steps outlined here. This is because this is the exact process that I follow when I'm building a Rovo agent. So if a customer comes to me and says, hey, I need to build an agent to accomplish this business need, and I want to, build that into my Jira project. The first thing I'm going to do is understand the problem and establish a clear measure of success. So the way I always describe this step 1 is that we don't want to be a hammer in search of a nail. We don't want to be thinking of Rovo or AI as the solution to every problem and just looking for a problem to slap AI onto and hope it works. Because AI isn't actually the solution to everything. Human interaction and kind of manual steps are very important for a lot of workflows. What AI does really well is it speeds up the process of everything that we're doing, right? So it's a force multiplier. It's a way to create some automations that alleviate the more mundane tasks, while everything that's a bit more complex can still be handled by our skilled, human staff. So the first step here is to really understand the problem we're trying to solve and to also establish that measure of success in a way that we can use later on to actually determine, did the agent solve my problem? So let's say that the problem that I'm trying to solve is that I have requests coming into JSM and I want to speed up the time to resolution. Well, that's a clear problem that I can define. So I've defined my problem and I understand it. The measure of success is going to be looking at metrics on how long it takes for tickets to be resolved in the project. So maybe at the end of this stage, I'm actually going to be, once I build the agent, I'll be comparing the metrics from before and after the agent was implemented to understand, did I actually accomplish that measure of success? Did I actually succeed in solving the problem that we set in step 1? Going into step 2, this is going to be your experimentation phase. So step 2 is going to be what we do our workshop on, essentially. It's just try everything and see how it goes, right? So we want to, in this stage, be open to the possibility that Rovo might not be the right solution. And by doing that, we just try everything and we see if it actually solves the problem. So we can, implement an agent, kind of build it out, see how it works, and decide, does that solve the problem? If not, we build a different agent and we try something a little bit different, see if that solves the problem. We do this experimentation. We probably at this point also have a kind of a champion inside the organization whose role in this is to make sure that we kind of keep the vision moving forward for that business result we're looking for that we set in step 1. And we're going to be really looking for those pain points to reduce the friction in our implementations and just experimenting with everything we can find. So in step 2, a lot of things are probably going to go wrong, and that's the entire point, because the problem with AI that we see in a lot of organizations is that when you first implement AI, there are things that are going to be inconsistent or that aren't going to work the way that you intend them to. And the whole process of step 2 is finding all of the ways to make it a lot more consistent and more rigid and more concrete in its answers And essentially, step two is where you iron out all of those problems. So we're going to show a little bit of that as we build our agent here in the workshop section. And that's going to be a good thing to keep in mind when we're in that step two of the process. Step three is to actually implement it with some end users. So this is like UAT. We're going to get feedback and we're going to be doing that comparison against our measure of success that we set in step one. So we're going to be actually implementing it, comparing the results to what we had before the agent was implemented, talking with end users, understanding if it works for them. If it doesn't solve the need, then we go back to step two again. But if it does solve the need and we just have some tweaks to make, then we move forward and we actually put it into production. So those are the main three steps for implementation that I follow. I also want to give a couple tips here that we're going to be thinking about as we build an agent. So the first one is to start small and iterate quickly. This is going to be very important because AI is a tool that can do a lot of things. And therefore, our first inkling is essentially to have it do everything. And that's a really important thing to think about as you're building your agents is that you want to start by having it do one thing at a time. So a big problem that I see is people start to dig into AI and want it to do really cool things for their organization. Is that you'll build an agent or you'll build some sort of AI tool that's designed to do everything all at once. And you build that all day one, and then it breaks and you have no idea where it broke because you built everything all at once. And so you have too many variables to handle, and it takes a long time to debug and figure out what's going on. Well, if we start with just one task at a time and we test that one task for the AI to do, then once that's working, we add the next task. Once it fails, we know where the failure was and we can fix it and move forward. So starting small and iterating quickly is going to be the way that we want to develop these. We want to keep it simple when it's possible. So we really want to simplify everything that we're doing with AI to where we're actually getting the value out of AI that it's good at. So we'll talk a little bit about how we use automations to do that because AI isn't the solution to everything, like I pointed out before. So we want to be able to narrow down the scope of what AI is doing in the process to the things it's really good at and get that value, that force multiplier, without having it do things that AI is not specifically positioned to be better at than other tools like automation. We also want to make sure we're using the right type of agent for the job at hand. So this is going to be whether we want to use like the chat or we want to use something like an automation to solve the problem. We'll be talking about, when to use each of those. All right, so I've done enough talking of just going through these things. I know it's a bit of a quick walkthrough of the basics for Rovo. What I want to do is just get hands-on because in my opinion, you can't really understand the tool till you have actually seen it in action. That's what we aim to do here with this workshop. So let's just go ahead and pull up this project here on our demo site. And I'm going to build an agent and we're going to do some kind of live demoing on that agent and show you my process for actually building and creating a Rovo agent in the instance, both in chat and in an automation. And if we have some extra time, I'll also show you some more complex versions of the same type of thing. So if you're going to build an agent, let's say for this project, so I have this workshop demo where I've basically mapped out, let's say I was building some stores for a chain of retail locations. I have some being built in St. Louis and some in Alabama, and I'm kind of like mapping it out as if that was in progress. Obviously, this isn't the most fleshed out data, but it shows enough for us to be able to kind of build an automation off of it that will be pretty valuable here. So what I want to do to start is just jump into the Rovo chat. So if you see at the top right, I have this chat button, and this is how we access Rovo chat. And it'll start off by just giving me the chat screens. This is just our basic chat. This is what works kind of out of the box. It allows you to ask questions about your environment. But really what I want to do is create an agent that's specific to this project. So I want to create an agent that understands that this project is going to be consisting of many different stores being built and run during different stages of the store's creation and operation. And I want it to help me understand what each store's list of tasks looks like at any given time. So I'm going to create an agent to specifically do that for this project. Now you'll notice if I go to this agents button, I actually get a list of all of the agents that are in the instance right now. Some of these are ones that we've built. Some of them are by Atlassian that are just built in that you get out of the box. But what I want to do is just hit the create button. And I'm going to start building an agent and walk you through my process there so you see that. So The first thing you'll see when you go to build an agent is this create an agent screen. You can actually just type a message and kind of ask AI to build the agent for you. In my opinion, you get to the point where you're, asking AI to build the AI, and I think that's a little bit too far removed for my liking. So I tend to hit this skip to manual setup button, and that takes me to just the options that I have to build. If you were to use that chat in the previous screen, it would eventually take you here as well. I just like to skip to it because I kind of know what I want to do for my prompt, and I know what works best based on what I've seen with Rovo. Now, what I'm going to do is name my agent something here. So I'm going to name this, store creation helper as an example. And in the description, you can kind of put whatever you want to there. I'm going to leave it blank just for the sake of time, but you can go through and write your description. That'll show up on the manage screen when you're looking at all of your different agents and when you're kind of picking one to talk with. And if I go ahead and go into the instructions, this is kind of going to be the bulk of our work here. So if you think about the way you might use a AI chatbot, a lot of times you'll hear this thing called like prompt engineering, where you're basically figuring out how do you correctly prompt the agent to get the response that's most useful for you. So this is what we're going to be doing from the instructions part of the process. It's this prompt engineering concept, where let's say if I go on to like ChatGPT, the first message that I send to ChatGPT is a description of how I want for it to respond to me. I tell it what's going to be most helpful to me, and then I give it my question. So instructions for Rovo are that first message that you're sending. It's that prompt engineering around telling the Rovo agent how it should behave and how it should respond to you. Now, I like to break down the instructions into three main sections here. So I start with basically what I expect the user to send to the agent. So that's going to be our first section. Then I'm going to talk about how the agent should use that information, what it should do with that information. And then I'm going to talk about how it should return that information back to the user with an answer. So those are my three sections. I'm going to go through each of those here and actually write out some instructions. Now I'm kind of building this along with you, so we'll see kind of what value we get out of Rovo for this agent as we build it. But I expect it will run into some inconsistencies. That's kind of part of the process, and we're going to show kind of how we resolve those as well. So starting from the instructions, what I want to do is start with that first piece of my instructions, which is what I expect the user to give the agent. So I'm going to say first describe what the agent is going to be doing. So you are an agent that will help to organize the different tasks for a particular store location. And then I'm going to say the user will ask you to give information about a certain location, and you will list back all of the tasks related to that location. So that's going to be my first section where I'm telling the agent, this is what the user is going to give you as the agent. And then I'm going to go into how I actually want to use that information. Now, one thing that I've actually noticed as I've built this first step of my instructions is that the word the user has been a little bit inconsistent. I put it here just to kind of have a reason to point it out. I've actually learned over time that the word invoker makes more sense to Rovo because of the fact that it might be a user, but it might also be an automation. And so it actually likes the word invoker better. Not totally sure why that is behind the scenes, but I expect it's because the automations could also be calling this. I've just found that to be a little bit more concrete and rigid in terms of implementation. All right, so going to the next kind of piece of my instructions, what I want to do from here is tell the agent how to use the information specifically. So I'm basically going to tell it, you will search through the summary and description of all of the tickets for and I'm going to look at the project that I want to actually do this in. So this is actually this WRD project. So in the or is it RWD? It's RWD. Okay. So in the RWD project, I'm telling it to look at the summary and description in the RWD project to find the name of the location that the invoker sent. So I want it to search through all of the tickets. And I actually might say here, you're going to search through everything, and any ticket that contains the name of the location will be considered related to that location. And we'll see how that works. So basically in this section, I'm just telling it, here are your criteria for determining if a ticket is going to be the same location as the one that the user passed in when they were chatting with it. The last step is just how to respond and how to give the answer back. So I'm going to say, give the, I'm going to actually say the word return here. So return a table. So we can do a list here. So let's return a list of all the tasks along with a link to that task and its status. So basically I want it to return to the invoker, the user, a list of all the tasks and a link to that task along with the status of that task, so I know where things are in the process. So we'll see how that works. This is a pretty simple prompt. Like I said, we're going to start small and iterate quickly. So it's really one task. And overall, this, over time, this might get a bit of a longer instruction set when we have more things we want it to be doing with this data. But for now, I'm going to start really small. I'm going to have these 3 sections, 3 paragraphs is usually how it's laid out for me. It is what the agent's going to receive, what it's going to do with that information, and what it's going to send back to the user. The next step here is actually going to be this knowledge section. So we do have conversation starters. This is just basically the default chats that you can ask for it to say. So if I wanted for it to be an example of a chat you might send to this agent, I can put that here. But the next, really important piece here is knowledge. This is where agents start to get really powerful because I can refine exactly what that agent is looking at. So for example, I only want this agent to be looking at the Jira project that I have here for the workshop demo. So I'm telling this agent, the only data you're able to access is the data from this project. That way it's not going to be changing the result of this based off of information it gets from a totally unrelated project. And that's going to cause problems for the actual value I want to get out of this particular agent. So this knowledge refining process is really important. I could even go further and say I want to take from this project, but also want to take from a Confluence space related to the project. So if I were to go a little bit further on this agent, maybe I was going to build in some logic that it goes and prioritizes based on things that it finds in a Confluence knowledge base. I can link it to just one space and to one project, and I can kind of narrow it down. You'll notice that the external sources, in this case Figma, also show up here. So I could actually tell an agent to just pull from one project and from Figma as an example. There is also this actions tab down here, this actions section. So actions are things that the agent should be able to do. It's like a skill that you give the agent. Things like adding a comment or creating an issue. I tend to not use these in most cases because usually if I need to use an action, I'm going to do that with an automation. And I'll show you exactly how I do that in a bit. I'm actually going to show you how to add a comment to an issue using an automation and this agent. The reason why you might use an action is if you're going to be entirely in Rovo chat in that screen and you want it to still be able to take action on behalf of the user. So if I actually told this to transition an issue or something like that, then it would show that the user has transitioned that issue if they're talking to the agent and the agent does that. You can also set up the agent to have its own persona where that agent shows as the user who transitioned the issue as well. So there are different things you can do from there. More to talk about with actions, but like I said, for the most part, I tend to use automations to accomplish the same goal as what actions would be accomplishing because of the fact that that's one area where AI is not actually going to be as solid as automations and as consistent as automations in creating an issue, for example. It's just going to be more reliable if you use the automation to do that part of the process. So I found that that's a bit more successful. All right, so that's going to be like my first Rovo agent creation here. I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And what that's going to do is actually create the agent and give it to me in the list where I'm going to the chat screen to start actually asking it questions. So if I go back over to my project here and go to search my agents, I should be able to see the, I think they called it store creation helper. I saw it down there somewhere. So store creation helper is now an agent that I've created and I can chat with it directly. What I want to do is just test if it works. So let's go ahead and see if that was successful. Let's see, say, tell me about the St. Louis location. Let's go ahead and see what it gives me back and see if we need to go ahead and change anything in our agent. All right, so I got 3 tasks. I got 2 that are in progress and 1 that is done. I got the links to those as well. If I hover over those links, I actually see a little bit of a preview. I can open the preview directly, and I also get a JQL that takes me directly to the list of issues because it knows that I was just looking for anything that has the word St. Louis in it. Now in the future, I might actually want it to get a little bit smarter and not just be a JQL search for the word St. Louis. You can go a little bit deeper and have it understand the context of, is it from not just St. Louis, but anything in the state, or is it from somewhere close by to St. Louis, and give me some information on that. So those are the things that as I kind of started small and then iterate on it, I might iterate further to add some more smart logic from that perspective. But you'll notice that I've already built an agent that's actually quite useful. This gives me information there. If I go, tell me about the Alabama location. We'll see if it gives me I have, yeah, there are 2 tasks here from that. So let's see if it is able to accomplish the same thing for the other location. And it was able to do that. Now I have my links and I have the same response, but I have that for the other location. Okay, so at this stage, what I really want to do is make sure that anybody who's creating a task has this kind of knowledge, right? So anyone that's on my instance now can go to Rovo Chat. They can pull up the store creation helper and they can get the information about the different stores that are being created. What I want to do is actually on the ticket that gets created for a location, just tell the user, here are all the other tickets already in flight for that location, to make sure we don't have duplicates, to make sure that we have the full context of everything that's going on, and to make sure that we're getting the most value out of that AI insight. I basically want to remove the step that's required right now of actually going to the chat screen and asking it directly. So if I go into, let's say, an automation and do the same thing with the same agent, actually, but do it from an automation standpoint, we're going to be able to accomplish that goal. And I do see some questions coming in. I will get to those questions kind of after I've walked through anything here, just in case I do answer the question along the way, but I will get to your questions, so don't worry about that. Okay, so looking at automation, what I want to do is just create a new rule. If you have not used automation for Jira or Confluence, it's a really powerful tool. It does a lot of really cool things. It's already a pretty fully featured set of tooling around automations, but using Rovo and AI, it just gets even more powerful. So what I want to do here is actually go ahead and use an issue trigger. So let's see, I want to use an issue created trigger. So basically, whenever an issue is created, I want to run this automation. So whenever I run this automation, what I want to do then is actually go ahead and start by asking a question to that Rovo agent. So that same agent that I just built, that I was just chatting with in Rovo Chat, what I want to do is use that Rovo agent. So I'm going to use the use Rovo agent action. I'm going to hit this connect, and it's going to allow me to use Rovo in here to talk to that same agent. So I'm going to look for my store creation helper. And now from my automation, I can actually give it a prompt almost in the same way that I would if I were talking to it in chat. So what I want to be able to do from here is to tell it to give me some information about the location that this issue that was created is using. So I need to do a little bit more work here because of the fact that I'm not actually chatting with it directly where I'm saying, tell me about the St. Louis location. I'm actually just going to have the summary and description of the issue that I just created or any other fields on that issue. And I want to use that to determine what location we're actually using in the first place to kind of build this process off of. So if I go into this prompt, I want to say, tell me about the location that this ticket is for. And then I want to go ahead and pass in the summary. So if you have not used automations, these double curly braces here allow you to use smart values. You can also do the same thing by just hitting over here, and I can look on the issue and find, let's say, the issue description is one, and copy that over. It just gives you kind of like a dictionary of all of these things. So I'm going to do the issue description, but I also want to actually start with the issue summary here. So issue dot summary. So basically, I'm just telling it, tell me about the location that this ticket is for, passing in the summary, passing in the description as well, and passing that into our store creation helper. Now, there are going to be scenarios where you have to create a new agent for an automation like this because you want to pass it in different types of information. I'm going to start this way and kind of see what that does for us, see if that accomplishes the goal, and it's actually able to figure out that the ticket I'm creating is for a certain location. But what I want to do is then I want to add a comment to the ticket that was created. So we look at comment, say comment on issue. And I really just want the comment to be, here are the related tasks. And the next thing I can do is there's actually another one of these smart values for an agent response. So you'll notice that's one of these options here. You can copy that over so I have the right spelling of everything. Agent response is going to represent the value that Rovo passed back when you asked it a question in the automation. So when I go in and I give it this prompt in the automation, the response that the agent gives me back, that's going to be this agent response. And I'm commenting that on the issue that was created. Now, from this perspective, you can actually also pick how you want for that comment to be added. So the current rule actor here is going to be me as a user who created the ticket. But I can actually tell it, I actually want the store creation helper to be the persona that is commenting on that ticket, which is a really cool thing that we can do from here. It's tied into the Rovo personas that it already has for each of those agents. And it'll actually say on the comment that it was created by the store creation helper. But if I left it as this original one that it had, then it would look like it was created by me if I created that ticket. All right, so what I want to do is go ahead and turn on the rule. It'll ask me to name it. So, store related issues. I'm going to turn on this rule, and we can just go ahead and go test it and see how that works and kind of see if that did the thing that we expected it to do in our tickets. So going back to my board, I'm going to create a new issue, and I'm going to say, let's see, get new items for the St. Louis store. Go ahead and create that. It'll take some time to run, depending on how much data it's searching through. So we can kind of give it a little bit of time to run there, but it should leave a comment once it runs through its process with the response that we got from that agent, and it'll show up here. We see that already did show up. So here are the related tasks, and you'll notice that it gave me this list of the top 3, essentially. So I'm actually noticing a couple of things that I might want to change if I were going to be going into this and refining it further, where I'm noticing it's restricting it to the top 3 for some reason. I know there are actually 4 tickets for St. Louis, so I probably want to make sure that I tell it to not restrict the number. And I also notice that it's including the actual ticket that I just created as one of the related tickets. So I want to tell it in the prompt specifically to not include the actual ticket I just created as well. So a couple of things I could do to refine it. I would go into the prompt and tell it to do those things in the instructions as well. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that right now, but just pointing out that this is kind of the first time I've run this automation. So I'm probably going to want to go back through and do some of those improvements as I'm looking through that process. Now, what I wanted to do is also show you a bit of a more complex example of this, and that's going to be in this similarity solutions project. So I actually have an example here. It takes a bit more time to run, so I already got one that I created. This is actually a kind of similar setup to that one where I created a new ticket called Implement the Common Reporting Tool. It's finding similar tickets across not just this project, but actually all of the projects in the entire instance. That's why it takes longer to run than the other one. You'll notice that it gave me a table with all of the solutions or all of the different tickets it found. This one's the same name, but it's in a different project, so it made that a similar issue. This one actually also is going to look at all of the resolved tickets that have similar names or similar topics and give you a potential solution to use for that topic. Now, the main thing I really want to show here is actually just the automation itself, because this automation actually has more than one agent on it. I go to my possible solution on create automation here, you'll actually notice that I have this use Rovo agent 3 different times. And the reason for that is for the same reasons that I was talking about before, where if we tell one agent or one AI tool to do everything all at once, it's not going to be as consistent. So we want to give it one task and have it do that one task really well. So for this one, I actually created 3 different agents. One that finds all the similar issues. So it goes through the entire instance, finds similarities between issues. And if there's any similarity between those issues, it adds them to the list of similar issues. And then I use another Robo agent to rank those in order of how similar they actually are. So basically finds like the top 5 most similar issues from this Robo agent. And then I have a third Robo agent that takes the response from the list of the most similar issues and it figures out what is a possible solution for the issue that I created here based off of those other tickets that were created and that were similar to it. So just pointing out that this is something that can really be extended to much further places where I've actually got lots of agents as a part of this. I can start to build these agents and reuse them in different workflows and reuse them in different automations because they handle tasks that can be put into these automations at any part of the process. All right, so I've got one more demo I want to show you because it shows really kind of like the full extent of everything that we can do with it, which is this Valiantis Intelligence Suite. This is actually a application that is used pretty much daily by our sales team. What it's designed to do is to provide a sales dossier for a client that we're going into a sales call with. So I'm actually going to type in the company name, just Valiantis, use ourselves, hit submit. Takes a bit of time to load, but what it's going to be doing is it's actually behind the scenes. This is a Forge app, so I'm using that developer platform I was talking about before, where actually, if you go to apps dropdown, it shows up as an app, Valiantis Intelligence Suite, where I've built this whole front end, so I can have more than just one input box here. I can actually have a full-fledged form or full-fledged set of front-end tooling, and I can build this application to use Rovo behind the scenes like it does here to search all of the information it's trained on. So that's external tools, that's the broader internet, that's your data, and to compile all of that together into a document about the company that I typed the name in here. It's using automations, it's using Forge, it's using kind of multiple different steps in the process chained together. It's kind of all of these things we've been talking about tied together into a simple tool that our sales team really does use daily in order to kind of gain information about different clients you're going into a conversation with. So I'm going to let that run. I'm going to answer some questions while it's running, and then I'll show you the output here in a second. Let me go ahead and pull up this Q&A and kind of go through those a little bit. All right, so I've got a question kind of from earlier on in the talk here. So by learn and trained on our data, is this actually fine-tuning a specific model for our company using our interactions, or is every new chat still a clean slate? That's a great question. So the way that that works is actually behind the scenes, everything on the Atlassian Cloud Platform is built on top of a graph interface where everything that Rovo is doing has access to all the different parts of that graph. And what that means is that when you add data into it from those external connections or from your data in the Atlassian Cloud Platform, it is trained on your model or on your data by kind of searching through and indexing everything on that graph. So everything lives in that graphical interface where now if I go and start a new chat, it is a clean slate in the sense that it's a new chat with new context, but the context of all of your data remains from chat to chat. So it is not really fine-tuning a model from a technical perspective because that's a different process entirely. What it's doing is creating a database essentially that it is able to crawl through effectively for your data so it can more quickly find the correct answers and be more efficient. So it's not fine-tuning a model, but it is accomplishing a similar goal by creating that underlying graph to find all the information. All right, so the next question here is, what does the agent governance look like? Is there a control plane and governance control around building and managing agents? That is also a great question. This is actually, I would say, an area where I would say that we need to see some more development from Atlassian around, and there is work being done there. What exists today is just the ability to restrict who can and cannot create agents. The ability to kind of like share agents across users and have a group, for example, in your user management, have access to a certain agent and be able to edit that agent. Those tools are kind of in progress and being built, but do not yet exist. So the governance story around agents is getting better every time that we see a new update, but we're going to see some more of that in the future where I do expect that agents are going to be tied directly to all of our user permissions in a way that we can say certain groups have access to certain different agents or certain different groups of agents. That type of categorization I expect to see in the future. It just doesn't actually exist as of today. So keep an eye out for those things as we're looking at new features coming out. Now this did finish loading, so I do want to pull up this dossier. This is the result of that run where I've got this, basically full on document of everything that I might need to know about Valiantis if I were going into a sales call with Valiantis and trying to kind of talk through what our most valuable services might be. So really valuable tool for our sales team. Wanted to show you that because it really does tie everything all together. All right, so the next question I've got in the Q&A section is, can you extend agents to Microsoft Teams chats for business user interaction? The answer to that is yes. I was actually just talking earlier today to a team who would like to do exactly that, is to integrate with Microsoft Teams. What it will do is it will basically index all the information on your Teams chats, of course, respecting the user permissions that exist in Teams, and give those chats as responses and like data to pull from as well, like the files and kind of all the different information you might have stored in chats that would otherwise be pretty hard to find. You can actually use that data to extend the information and context that Rovo agents and Rovo chat and search have access to. So Teams is a built-in connection that we have from Rovo already, and that is a really cool thing to see already from Atlassian. All right, so the question is, does Rovo agent work with JSM? And can the agent look at data that is in your JSM project? So the answer to that is yes. So a Rovo agent works in a JSM project the same way it works in a Jira project. So this example that I did with the kind of workshop demo here, if this was a JSM project, it would work the exact same way. There is also a tool in JSM called virtual agents. That is a different tool from Rovo, but it is also a kind of similar interface. So that is also a tool you have in JSM. We can talk further about that if you want to reach out about it. But Rovo in a JSM project works the exact same way as it does in a standard Jira project. It has access to the same kind of data and same kind of workflow and ability to kind of create these agents around it. So if this, for example, was a JSM project, it worked the same way. In fact, the example that I showed on one of the slides was built in a JSM project and did it the exact same way as this. All right, so the next question is it possible to grant access to a certain number of users, as an example, 10 out of 100 users? So this is kind of going into the licensing conversation, I believe, around Rovo. From what I understand, there is work being done to make it possible to only have a subset of your users have access to Rovo and kind of license it that way. But what I've seen so far is that for the most part, you're going to be either using all of Rovo for the entire user base, or you're not going to be using Rovo. One of the reasons for that is even if you were able to say only 10 users have access out of 100, what that means is that Rovo doesn't have access to the user data for those other 90, because the way that the pricing is built is also around the fact that every user you add is a new potential set of data for the graph and for the Rovo agents to crawl through. And so it scales the cost on the infrastructure side for Atlassian a bit. And so if you want to get the full benefit out of Rovo, you're looking at having as many users on Rovo as you can. That's a good thing to keep in mind. But that's a thing to talk with Atlassian about, see what they've been working on, and kind of understand the best way to move forward with licensing based on what Atlassian is working on that front. All right, so can Rovo also crawl through data in Databricks or other data sources connected to Atlassian Analytics? That's a great question. So as of right now, I don't believe that Rovo has direct connection to the analytics suite, but that is a future thing that we expect to see. So like I said, the underlying tools that are used for the entire Atlassian cloud platform is actually a way to connect everything in the platform together. So one of the things that you're going to see about that is that over time, Rovo only gets more powerful and gets access to more data. So as Atlassian furthers this concept of, you'll hear the words teamwork graph, you'll hear system of work. These are all things that Atlassian is saying a lot these days. And what that means from a technical perspective and how it flows into Rovo is that Rovo is going to gain access to essentially everything in the Atlassian cloud platform over time as that system of work mindset gets into the technical details of how the cloud platform is built. So as of right now, I don't believe we have that direct connection to Databricks like we do currently in analytics, but I expect that to be something that we do see in the future. And everything that I've heard working with the Atlassian teams directly is pointing to that being the future vision. So it's a really great opportunity now to kind of get in on the ground floor of Rovo, where there's already a ton of really great, valuable things to get out of Rovo. But we also know that very quickly in the future, we're going to get more and more value as those things get more interconnected. All right, so the next question is Rovo's AI model an open source one? Also, does Rovo work with Jira Server or Data Center? So as far as I'm aware, the model itself is not open source. I do know that Atlassian has some initiatives to kind of make more of the underlying tooling for the Atlassian Cloud Platform open source. I don't know if that extends to Rovo or not. That'd be a question to kind of pose to Atlassian and see what they're working on that front, or if that's on their radar. As far as if it works with Jira Data Center or with Server, because of the fact that the way that this infrastructure runs is very intensive, it's actually probably much more than any data center instance could run locally for most organizations, and it also just doesn't scale well at that point. What it does have though is we expect to see connectors for data center and server. So if you have legacy data center server tooling, or you have some things that just need to stay on-prem with data center, and you have also some things that are being done in cloud, kind of a combination, we should see the ability to connect to the data center data to our cloud site in a way that we can use Rovo, chat, and search and everything like that with our agents as well to understand context from the data center, but to not necessarily directly chat with it. Like you're not going to get this button in data center where I can open up Rovo chat. But you can connect to the data in data center using either Forge or those connectors that we expect to see from Atlassian as well. The question is, can you comment on long versus short memory of Rovo agents? Okay, yeah. So with Rovo agents in general, what we're going to see is that they have the same kind of concept that you see with other AI chatbots. If you're using it from chat, which is that you have the concept of a conversation, and then you can start a new conversation. So if I hit the new button here, it's a new conversation with new context, and it doesn't use any of the context from that previous conversation. So if I were to actually go look though at the history, I can see all of the chats that I might have given it in the past. I can go back to those conversations and resume those conversations as well. So it's similar to other tools like this where you can get access to those previous chats, you can create new ones, and the conversation itself is context that is both kind of that short-term memory of Rovo. The long-term memory of Rovo is anything that's actually a piece of data in either Confluence or Jira or any other Atlassian product, or in those external products that have connections into Rovo. So the question is, are there additional costs to connections to other data sources like SharePoint, Google Drive, etc.? What is considered an object? Is it like one document is an object? Does Rovo copy this data into Atlassian's cloud server? Yeah, so right now the cost, there's no additional cost other than just the Rovo licenses to connect to other sources. The reason for that is because the way that they work is they're going to be just calling out to the APIs that exist with the correct authentication APIs along with those tools. And so that the load is actually not on Atlassian as much for that. So you don't have to pay extra for it. The way that it affects the usage limits on Rovo is going to be something that we'll have to see over time how the pricing model evolves. We know from Atlassian that they don't intend to make money off of infrastructure. They intend to break even on infrastructure, and they only are going to charge for like actual features beyond the infrastructure. So I don't expect for the cost of anything like that to be a prohibitive factor because you're not paying, a huge markup for the infrastructure. It's the same kind of cost that you would have if you were to implement this with really any other tool. And so I think that that's a really good thing we've seen from Atlassian is that pricing on everything across the board, both in Forge and Rovo and any of these custom pieces that we can build, are really done in a way that is the same price you would have for any other platform because it's just the raw infrastructure cost, but with all the power and value that we get on top of it from Atlassian tools. Okay, so I've gone through all of the questions there. If you have any more, feel free to ask them. I'm going to jump back to this final slide just to point out that we do a lot of things at Valiantis with Rovo agents. We're working with a lot of customers right now on Rovo Jumpstart offerings and kind of working with customers. If you have a desire to dig deeper into Rovo, understand specifically how it ties into your use cases, how we can go further than what we can kind of talk about in this 1 hour slot, and really dig into where is the business value for your organization, please reach out. Let us know. We can work with you. We can find ways to get you on a demo site. We can have you be able to have access to Rovo and test around with it and play with it. Actually get some hands-on work with our teams, building some agents together. We can have really good ways to work with you to determine the business case for Rovo in your organization. So please reach out with any of that. Reach out with any future questions you might have. Let us know. We'd love to keep talking about it. Rovo is a big part of the future of Atlassian Cloud and a really cool tool that we see in the platform. So we'd love to talk about it, and we're doing a lot of work with it and around it. And we have a lot more insights to kind of provide around the platform and around Rovo. So please reach out. And aside from that, thank you for attending, and hopefully this was valuable to you. And hopefully we see you back for a Rovo Jumpstart or some other conversation that we have with you, some of our trainings that are upcoming as well. And just thank you for attending, and hope you have a great rest of your day.